What happens when simmering prejudice is given power in the one place where everyone is supposed to be equal? In the brightly lit, sterile corridors of Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, an 18-year-old girl, a certified prodigy on the brink of shaping the future, holds a premier ticket. It's not a golden ticket to a fantasy world, but to the very front of the plane, first class. But one gate agent, stewing in a quiet, simmering bitterness, sees not a genius, but a problem. She sees a young black woman and decides, with a contemptuous sneer, that her ticket must be fake. What she's unaware of is that with a single press of a button on her phone, this young woman isn't just calling her father. She is about to bring down a storm of consequences. The atmosphere in Hartsfield-Jackson's Concourse E was a familiar orchestra of controlled chaos. The rattling thunder of rolling suitcases, the low, global murmur of 1,000 conversations blending into one, the distant, disembodied female voice announcing boarding groups and final destinations. It was the background noise of humanity on the move. For 18-year-old Amara Dubois, it was the sound of her future calling. Tucked into a seat near Gate E14, she was a small island of tranquility amid a swirling river of travelers. Her backpack, a minimalist gray design from a brand called Air, rested by her feet. Inside, nestled between a powerful laptop and a portfolio filled with neuro-linguistic programming schematics, was the culmination of 3 years of her life's work on a tiny, encrypted drive. On that drive was Synapse, a revolutionary neural interface software she had developed in her bedroom between advanced placement courses and scholarship applications. Synapse was not just an improvement, it was a fundamental shift. It created a direct, non-invasive bridge between the human brain and external devices with a 99.9% accuracy rate. A breakthrough that tech behemoths had invested billions in to achieve. That drive was the reason she sat here, holding a first-class ticket for an Atlas Air flight to Seattle. In 2 days, she was scheduled to be the keynote speaker at Future Forward, the world's most influential technology conference. She was not just a speaker, she was the inaugural recipient of their Prometheus Prize, an award given to a young innovator whose work was poised to redefine an industry. The prize came with a $500,000 grant, and more importantly, a place at the table with the titans of the tech world. The first-class ticket was their unspoken message: "You belong here." Amara smoothed out the crisp paper of her boarding pass for the 5th time. Dubois, Amara, Seat 1A, Zone 1. The reality of it felt like a dream. She had flown before, but always in the rear of the plane, sandwiched in the tight confines of economy. Seat 1A was more than a seat. It was a symbol. She glanced towards the gate counter. 2 agents were at their stations. One, a younger man with a kind, if weary, expression, was patiently assisting an elderly couple with their baggage questions. The other was a woman who appeared to be in her late 40s. Her brunette hair was pulled back into a severe bun, and her lipstick was a harsh shade of magenta that seemed to amplify the perpetual downward turn of her mouth. Her name tag identified her as Susan Pierce. Amara watched as Susan dealt with a passenger, a businessman in a well-tailored but rumpled suit. He politely asked about the flight's on-time status, and Susan responded with a sigh so full of dramatic exasperation it felt rehearsed. Her voice was clipped, laced with a palpable impatience, as if the man's simple query was a personal affront. Amara felt a familiar knot of apprehension tighten in her stomach. She had met people like Susan before, individuals who seemed to carry a personal storm cloud with them, eager for the chance to let it rain on everyone else. "We will now begin pre-boarding for Atlas Air Flight 724 to Seattle," announced the Kinder agent, whose name tag read Daniel Sharma. "We invite our active-duty military members and any guests who require special assistance to approach the gate." A few minutes passed. Then came the announcement Amara had been waiting for. "We now invite our first-class passengers, Zone 1, to begin boarding." Amara stood, her heart performing a little nervous tap dance of excitement. She slipped her air backpack over her shoulder, took a steadying breath, and walked the few steps to the boarding lane. She was the third person in line. The couple ahead of her, older and draped in quiet luxury, were met with a cloyingly sweet smile from Susan. Their boarding passes were scanned with an exaggerated flourish. Then, it was Amara's turn. She stepped forward, handing her boarding pass and passport to Susan Pierce. "Good afternoon," Amara said, her voice even and polite. Susan accepted the documents without making eye contact, her attention fixed on her computer terminal. She scanned the passport. Dubois, Amara, United States of America. Then she scanned the boarding pass. The machine let out a small affirmative beep, but Susan did not move. She finally raised her eyes from the computer screen and let them travel over Amara. It was a slow, deliberate inspection that felt less like a security procedure and more like a hostile appraisal. She took in the stylish hoodie, the expensive running shoes, the neat braids, and her gaze, a flat, unforgiving hazel, seemed to harden. "Funny," Susan said, her voice just loud enough for those nearby to hear. She tapped a long fingernail on the boarding pass. "The machine says this is valid." Amara's polite expression faltered. "I'm sorry?" "Zone 1, Seat 1A, Susan continued, a smirk twisting her lips. She held the ticket up like a questionable piece of evidence. "First class. That's a very pricey ticket for someone like you. Did you get turned around on your way to the back of the bus?" The atmosphere instantly soured. The businessman behind Amara shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable. Daniel Sharma glanced over, a worried expression on his face. Amara felt a surge of heat rise in her chest, but she fought it down. Her father's voice resonated in her memory. "Grace is a shield. Never let them see you bleed." "No, I believe I'm in the right place," Amara said, her tone steady. "The ticket was provided by the conference I'm attending." Susan let out a sharp, condescending laugh. It was a grating, unpleasant sound. "A conference? Oh, right. And I'm the Queen of Sheba. Honey, let's quit the charade. Where did you really get this? Find it on the floor? Did your boyfriend splurge with his daddy's money?" Each question was a calculated jab, meticulously crafted to humiliate and provoke. The underlying assumption was as clear as it was toxic. A young black woman couldn't possibly be here by her own means. "The ticket is legitimate," Amara stated, refusing to be baited. "It was booked by the Future Forward Foundation. You are free to look them up. Now, may I please have my boarding pass so I can board the plane?" "No," Susan said, her smirk widening into a look of triumph. She relished this. She savored the power she wielded from her small kingdom behind the counter. "I don't believe you will." And with a deliberate theatrical motion, she ripped the boarding pass in two. The sound tore through the strained silence at the gate. She contemptuously dropped the two halves onto the counter. "We have a strict policy against fraudulent travel documents here at Atlas Air," Susan announced loudly, her voice ringing with feigned authority. "You should have aimed for an economy ticket, sweetie. It might have been more convincing. Now I'm going to have to ask you to step aside before I call security." The world seemed to decelerate. Amara stared at the two pieces of her ticket, the symbol of her accomplishment, torn asunder by pure, unadulterated prejudice. The humiliation was a physical sensation, a hot blush spreading across her cheeks. She could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on her, some curious, some pitying, and some, disturbingly, sharing in Susan's smug satisfaction. But then the wave of humiliation crested and receded, replaced by an ice-cold, sharp focus. She had been composed. She had been respectful. She had done nothing wrong. Susan Pierce had just made a catastrophic error. Is this not the inevitable outcome when quiet contempt is given even the smallest platform of authority? How many of us have stood by and watched a minor despot on a small throne, a person behind a counter or a desk, wield their modicum of power like a scepter, purely for the satisfaction of making someone else feel small? What does it say about a person when their first instinct is not to help, but to hinder? Amara did not raise her voice. She did not weep. She simply met Susan's gaze and held it. "You're right," Amara said, her voice now unnervingly quiet. "You should make a call." She reached into her pocket, pulled out her Spectra X phone, and unlocked it. "But I'll go first." The act of tearing the boarding pass was a petty declaration of war. For Susan Pierce, it was the zenith of her power trip, the moment she imposed her will on her small corner of the world, Gate E14. She registered the shock on the girl's face, the flicker of hurt in her eyes, and it nourished a withered part of her spirit. She felt validated. In her mind, she had caught a fraud, defended her employer, and put an arrogant young woman back in her place. Her colleague, Daniel Sharma, hurried over. "Susan, what are you doing?" he hissed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The ticket was valid. The system accepted it." "The system can be wrong, Daniel," Susan retorted, not bothering to lower her voice. She wanted an audience. "Use your common sense. She obviously doesn't belong in first class. It's a textbook fraudulent ticket. I'm saving the company a massive headache when the actual passenger for 1A arrives." A man in the first-class line, a well-dressed executive named Mr. Peterson, who had seen the entire exchange, finally intervened. "This is completely out of line," he said, his voice a low rumble of disapproval. "I saw the entire thing. The young lady was perfectly polite. You, on the other hand, have been nothing but unprofessional." Susan shot him a glare. "Sir, with all due respect, this is now a security matter, and it doesn't involve you. Please step back." The gears, however, were already in motion. An accusation of a fraudulent premium ticket was a serious matter, guaranteeing security involvement, endless paperwork, and significant delays. Susan was gleefully creating a vortex of trouble, and she stood smiling in its calm eye. Amara, however, remained almost unnaturally composed. She ignored the torn scraps of paper. She ignored the murmurs spreading through the growing crowd of onlookers. Her focus was entirely on her phone. Her thumb moved with precision across the screen, tapping on a single contact saved simply as Dad. She raised the phone to her ear. Susan watched, a scoff at the ready. Who was she calling? Her mother? A boyfriend to come and yell? It was just pathetic. The call connected instantly. "Hi, Dad," Amara said, her voice steady and clear, a stark contrast to the charged atmosphere around her. "Sorry to call you during a meeting." She paused, listening. "I'm fine, but we have a small issue. I'm at Hartsfield-Jackson, Concourse E, Gate E14, Atlas Air. The gate agent has decided my ticket is fake." Susan rolled her eyes dramatically for the benefit of her audience. This was just perfect. A little daddy's girl about to get a dose of reality. Amara continued. "Yes, the one Future Forward booked for me. That's the one, 1A." Well, she just tore it in half. She listened again, a small, wry smile appearing on her lips for the first time. No, Dad, don't get loud. I'm handling it. Her eyes flicked up and met Susan's. A cold fire was now visible in their depths. She read the name tag aloud, enunciating each syllable with perfect clarity. Susan. Pierce. She held Susan's gaze as she spoke into the phone. Yes, that's her. She is denying me passage and is threatening to call airport security. Another pause. Okay. What's the ETA on that? Amara's eyebrows arched slightly. 3 minutes? That's very efficient. All right, I'll just wait here. Love you too. She ended the call and placed the phone back in her pocket. She looked directly at Susan, her expression now impossible to read. My father is handling it, she said simply. He said I should wait right here. Susan burst into laughter, a genuine mocking cackle this time. Oh, your father is handling it? I'm absolutely trembling. What's he going to do? Send a strongly worded fax? Leave a bad review online? Listen, kid. I've been doing this for over 20 years. I've heard every excuse in the book. This little act is amusing, but it's over. She pointed a rigid finger away from the gate. I am giving you one final chance to walk away from this counter before you are escorted out of this airport for causing a disturbance. I was told to wait here, Amara repeated, her voice as unyielding as steel. She did not move a single inch. She just stood there, a silent, immovable challenge. How quickly a small moment can become a tipping point. One person pushes too far, and an invisible line is crossed, triggering a response no one could have anticipated. It makes one wonder about all the unseen levers of power in the world, waiting for a single, quiet call to set them in motion. The standoff was total. The boarding line had completely stopped. Passengers were grumbling, stretching their necks to get a better view of the unfolding drama. Daniel Sharma was now frantically speaking into his own headset, likely to a supervisor, his face pale with stress. Mr. Peterson, the executive, had taken out his phone and was discreetly recording the entire interaction. For Susan, this was the last straw. The girl's calm defiance was more enraging than any shouting match could ever be. It was as if she knew something Susan didn't. The sheer audacity. Fine, have it your way, Susan snapped. She grabbed the phone at her station, her knuckles white as she jabbed the button for airport police. Yes, this is Susan Pierce at Atlas Air, gate E14. I have a hostile individual here who is refusing to comply with crew member instructions. She is trying to board with what I believe are fraudulent documents. I need APD here immediately. She slammed the receiver down, her chest heaving with adrenaline and righteous fury. She gave Amara a look of pure venom. You're in for it now, little girl. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Amara almost smiled. No, she said softly. You really don't. 2 minutes passed. 3. The tension was so thick it felt hard to breathe. Passengers now had their phones out openly, their screens creating a small constellation of lights aimed at the gate. The name Susan Pierce was being whispered up and down the concourse. Then, a shift. It wasn't the 2 Atlanta police officers Susan was expecting. It began with the massive flight information displays that dominated the terminal. They all blinked at once. Every flight, to Dallas, Paris, Rio, vanished. They were replaced by 3 words in stark, blocky red letters. Terminal-wide security protocol enacted. All operations suspended. Stand by. A collective gasp swept through Concourse E. The murmur of 1,000 voices escalated into a confused roar, and then the public address system, which moments ago had been calmly announcing boarding zones, crackled to life. But it was not the familiar automated voice. It was a man's voice, severe and official, with an unmistakable tone of command. This is a federal security directive by order of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. All operations at Hartsfield-Jackson International Concourse E are hereby suspended. I repeat, all flight operations are suspended. All passengers are to remain in place. All airport and airline staff are to await instructions from federal agents. Susan Pierce's triumphant smirk dissolved. The color drained from her face, leaving her magenta lipstick looking garish and absurd. She stared at the red screens, then at Amara, her mind frantically trying to sever the impossible connection between the two events. It must be a coincidence, a security drill, a bomb threat. It had to be. But then she saw them. Striding down the center of the concourse, moving with a synchronized purpose that parted the sea of baffled travelers, were not two APD officers. It was a group of 6 men. They wore dark, impeccably tailored suits and had the grim, focused faces of people for whom this was not a drill. They wore earpieces and lapel pins that did not belong to any airline or airport authority. They were feds, and they were walking directly, without a flicker of hesitation, towards Gate E14. The arrival of the federal agents transformed the atmosphere from merely chaotic to hyper-focused. The ambient noise of the terminal seemed to evaporate, replaced by a singular, piercing point of tension. The agents moved with a quiet, intimidating confidence, their polished shoes barely making a sound on the tile floor. The lead agent, a severe-looking man with salt and pepper hair and a face that looked like it was carved from granite, had his eyes locked on Gate E14. Daniel Sharma saw them coming and looked as though he was about to be physically ill. He grabbed Susan's arm. "Susan, what did you do?" he whispered, his voice trembling. "Who is that girl?" Susan was frozen, her mind a frantic cascade of denial. "It's not her," she stammered, more to herself than to Daniel. "It's just a drill, a threat. It has nothing to do with her." But even as she mouthed the words, a cold dread told her it was a lie. The lead agent's path was too direct, too precise. He was not scanning for a threat. He was homing in on a target. The agents reached the gate, forming a loose, imposing semicircle around the counter. They completely ignored Susan and Daniel. The lead agent's eyes found Amara instantly. His stern expression softened almost imperceptibly with a hint of concern. "Miss Dubois," he stated, his voice calm but resonant with authority. "Agent Hayes, Diplomatic Security Service. Your father sent us." The title, Diplomatic Security Service, landed on Susan like a physical blow. The law enforcement and security arm of the U.S. Department of State. Not airline management, not even the FBI. This was a different level entirely. Susan felt the floor drop out from under her. Her carefully guarded world of petty dominance was being publicly dismantled, brick by brick, in front of an audience of hundreds. Amara nodded to Agent Hayes. "Thank you for the prompt response." "The general was insistent," Agent Hayes replied, a ghost of a smile on his lips. He then turned his professional gaze to the scene, taking in the 2 torn halves of Amara's boarding pass on the counter. He looked from the torn paper to Susan, who was now the color of chalk, and, "Ma'am," he said, his voice dropping several degrees, "are you responsible for this?" Susan opened her mouth, but no sound emerged. Her mind was a panicked blur, searching for an escape route, a justification, any way to spin this. There was none. Her own actions had constructed this cage. Is this true justice, or is it merely privilege in action? It's impossible not to wonder what would have happened to Amara if her father was a mechanic from Macon instead of a 4-star general? Does a just outcome that is only accessible through extraordinary power and connections still count as justice for all? Or does it simply highlight how broken the system is for everyone else? Daniel Sharma, seeing his entire career flashing before his eyes, stepped forward. "Sir, my name is Daniel Sharma. I'm the lead agent for this gate. There seems to have been a terrible misunderstanding." Agent Hayes's cold, dismissive gaze flickered to him. "A misunderstanding? My understanding is that your agent, Miss Pierce," he said, glancing at her name tag, "accused a fully validated, ticketed first-class passenger of fraud, publicly humiliated her, and subsequently destroyed a legal travel document. Is that the misunderstanding we're discussing?" I thought it was counterfeit," Susan finally managed to choke out, her voice a pathetic squeak. "I was just following procedure." "Procedure?" A new voice cut in. An Atlas Air corporate executive, a man named Mark Riley, had come sprinting down the concourse, his tie askew and his face slick with sweat. He had obviously been alerted by Daniel and seen the DSS directive. "What procedure involves tearing up a passenger's boarding pass? Susan, have you lost your mind?" Riley turned to Agent Hayes, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Agent, on behalf of Atlas Air, I am profoundly, deeply sorry for this. This is not who we are. This employee will be dealt with immediately." Agent Hayes held up a hand, silencing him. "Mr. Riley, with all due respect, this has escalated beyond a customer service issue for your airline. When Ms. Pierce destroyed that travel document and denied passage to this specific citizen, she wasn't just being unprofessional. She was interfering with a federally monitored process, and in doing so with this particular citizen," he gestured towards Amara, "she inadvertently triggered a national security protocol." A national security protocol? The phrase hung in the air, both terrifying and absurd. Susan stared at Amara, this quiet, well-dressed teenager. Who in God's name was she? Agent Hayes wasn't finished, wasn't. He looked back at Susan, his eyes like ice chips. "Your actions, Ms. Pierce, tripped a specific alert tied to this passenger's protected travel profile. A guardian protocol. It assumes that a hostile actor is attempting to illegally obstruct or harm a person of critical interest to the United States government. That is why Concourse E is currently shut down. Not because of some imagined threat, but because of you." The weight of that statement crushed the air out of the gate area. Every delayed flight, every missed meeting, every distressed passenger, it was all on her. Her sneer, her condescending laugh, her petty act of ripping a piece of paper. Mr. Peterson, the executive who had been recording, stepped forward and addressed Agent Hayes. "Sir, for whatever it's worth, I witnessed the entire exchange. This young woman," he said, nodding respectfully at Amara, "was a model of grace under pressure. The gate agent was abusive from the moment she looked at her." He held up his phone, "And I have it all on video." Agent Hayes gave a curt nod. "We will need a copy of that, sir. Thank you." He then turned to two of his agents. "Escort Miss Pierce to the federal substation. Secure her credentials and all personal items. She is to have no further contact with any airport or airline systems. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be in contact shortly." The two agents moved forward. One gently but firmly took Susan by the arm. The reality finally broke through her wall of denial. This was real. This was the end of her job, the end of her life as she knew it. "No," she whispered, trying to pull her arm back. "You can't do this to me. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Agent Hayes stated, his voice devoid of any emotion. "I would strongly advise you to begin exercising it immediately." As the agents led a now openly sobbing Susan Pierce away, the crowd of passengers watched in stunned silence. They had gathered for a spectacle and received one for the history books. With Susan gone, the tense atmosphere began to dissipate. Agent Hayes turned back to Amara. "Miss Dubois, my apologies for this display. We are arranging for a private government transport to get you to Seattle. It's waiting on the tarmac. You will not miss your conference." Amara finally exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Thank you, Agent Hayes. That's extremely kind, but it's not necessary. I'd just like to get on my flight." Mark Riley, the Atlas executive, saw a sliver of an opportunity to perform damage control. "Of course, Miss Dubois. Absolutely. We will reboard the flight at once. Please, you can have the entire first-class cabin if you wish. Anything you desire." Amara considered it for a moment. She looked at the faces of the other passengers, the ones who had been held up, the families with restless children, the people just wanting to get to their destination. "Just board the plane," she said. "All of it. Get these people on their way." Agent Hayes nodded, visibly impressed by her composure. He spoke into his wrist communicator. "Stand down the alert. The asset is secure. I repeat, stand down the alert. Reopen the concourse." Across the terminal, the red warning screens blinked and returned to life, displaying the familiar lists of departures and destinations. The public address system clicked back on with the calm, automated voice, as if nothing had ever happened. The immediate crisis was over. But for Susan Pierce, and for Atlas Air, the consequences were just beginning to unfold. The walk down the jet bridge was a surreal passage from one world to another. Behind her was the terminal's lingering chaos, the phantom echoes of Susan Pierce's public disgrace, and the unnerving efficiency of federal power. Ahead lay the quiet, hushed sanctuary of Atlas Air's first class. The flight attendants greeted her with faces that were a tightrope walk of awe, fear, and profound apology. "Miss Dubois," the purser said, her voice trembling slightly. "On behalf of our entire crew, there are simply no words. I am so terribly sorry for what you were forced to endure." "Thank you," Amara said, offering a small, weary smile. "I'm all right. I just want to get to Seattle." As she settled into the plush leather of Seat 1A, a private pod of comfort and technology, the other first-class passengers boarded. They gave her a wide berth, their glances a mixture of raw curiosity and deep respect. Mr. Peterson, the executive, caught her eye as he passed. He gave her a slow, deliberate nod, a silent acknowledgement of the incredible composure she had displayed. Once the plane had pushed back from the gate, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her father. "Dad. On the ground in Seattle. All sorted. Amara. Just pushed back. Thanks for the assistance, Dad." It was a little more intense than I expected. "Dad. I can imagine. Hayes gave me the full report. I'm proud of you, Amara. You kept your cool. You didn't stoop to her level. That's my daughter." Amara. "I remembered what you always taught me, but shutting down an entire airport concourse, was that really necessary?" Dad. "It's a protocol, honey. Not personal. You have a Guardian flag on your travel profile. It's a quiet tag. If your travel is ever forcibly stopped by a non-state actor, it triggers an automatic, escalating response. The system is built to assume a potential abduction attempt. Her actions checked every box." Amara stared at the screen. A Guardian flag, a protocol. It sounded so sterile and bureaucratic, but she had just seen its real-world application. It was a sledgehammer, and Susan Pierce had brought it down squarely on her own head. "Amara, what happens to her now?" Dad, that's not your concern. Your concern is to go give the speech of your life. Make them see the future. I'll see you in a few days. Love you. She put her phone away as the plane began its powerful climb, banking over the vast expanse of the Atlanta suburbs. Below, Hartsfield-Jackson was running smoothly again, but the incident at Gate E14 was already spreading, multiplying through the digital veins of the modern world. Mr. Peterson's video, clear and damning, had been sent to a journalist he knew at a national news outlet before the plane had even reached cruising altitude. By the time Amara's flight was somewhere over the plains of Kansas, the story was the #1 trending topic on every social media platform. The initial headline was stark: Gate agent federally detained after racially profiling black teen and destroying her first-class ticket. The video was a viral firestorm. It showed everything: Susan's condescending sneer, Amara's unshakable poise, the aggressive rip of the ticket, and Susan's mocking laughter. It was a perfect, crystalline example of prejudice captured in high definition. The internet, in its collective and often merciless judgment, descended upon Susan Pierce. Her name, her face, and her actions were inescapable. She became, in a matter of hours, one of the most hated people in America. The collective fury of the web is a powerful force for accountability, but it's fair to ask if it has become a digital mob that relishes destruction, often leaving no space for nuance, context, or the possibility of redemption. The fallout for Atlas Air was immediate and catastrophic. Their stock, which had been performing well, dropped 9% in after-hours trading, a paper loss of nearly $1 billion. Their social media feeds were a raging torrent of public fury. The hashtag #AtlasHate was trending globally. The company's carefully curated image of premium, inclusive service had been incinerated. In a sterile boardroom in Dallas, the CEO of Atlas Air, a man named Edward Vance, was in full-blown crisis mode. On an emergency conference call with his board and PR team, the mood was apocalyptic. "How in God's name did this happen?" Vance demanded, his voice hoarse with rage. "Who is this Susan Pierce? What does her file say?" A frantic HR executive shuffled papers on his end of the call. "Sir, it's not good. Pierce has been with us for 22 years. She has 12 formal passenger complaints on her record for rudeness. 6 of those specifically allege racial bias." "6?" Vance roared. "And she was still working a gate? Still facing customers?" Her direct supervisor was Daniel Sharma, the HR exec stammered. He noted the complaints but only ever issued verbal warnings. He rated her as meeting expectations on her last review. He indicated he wanted to avoid the administrative burden of a formal disciplinary process. The systemic failure was laid bare. It was not just one malevolent employee. It was an entire culture of conflict avoidance and managerial cowardice that had allowed a cancer like Susan Pierce to fester for 2 decades. Daniel Sharma's desire to avoid paperwork had just cost the company a fortune in market value and inflicted irreparable damage to its brand. The first heads began to roll. Mark Riley, the concourse E-manager, was fired for dereliction of duty. Daniel Sharma was terminated for gross negligence. But the gravest consequences were still unfolding. Meanwhile, in a sterile interrogation room at Hartsfield-Jackson, Susan Pierce was beginning to learn the true scope of her personal cataclysm. 2 lawyers from the U.S. Attorney's Office were outlining her situation in cold, dispassionate legal terms. "Ms. Pierce, you are facing a number of potential federal charges, The lead lawyer, a sharp woman named Jessica Reyes, explained. First, interference with the lawful duties of transportation security personnel. Second, destruction of a legal travel document, which under post-9/11 aviation law can be a felony. And third, given the specific identity of the passenger's father, we are looking at charges under 18 U.S. Code Section 115, which relates to influencing, impeding, or retaliating against a federal official by threatening a family member. Susan stared at her blankly. I didn't threaten anyone. And that girl isn't a federal official. Her father is General Thomas Dubois, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Reyes said flatly. The statute is designed to protect high-level officials from being intimidated or influenced through actions taken against their families. Your targeted harassment of his daughter on federally regulated ground will be viewed through that very specific lens. Did you think you were just hassling some random teenager? The name finally pierced through her fog of self-pity. General Dubois. She had seen him on television, a formidable figure standing beside the president during national security briefings. He was arguably the most powerful uniformed officer in the world, and she had laughed in his daughter's face and torn up her ticket. The full, crushing weight of her actions finally broke her. This wasn't about getting fired. This wasn't about being shamed online. This was about federal prison. This was about her entire life being obliterated because she couldn't tolerate the sight of a black teenager holding a first-class ticket. The cosmic irony was breathtaking. In her desperate attempt to exercise a tiny sliver of power, she had provoked a force she could not have possibly imagined. As Atlas Air Flight 724 descended through the misty, evergreen-choked landscapes surrounding Seattle, Amara Dubois was mostly oblivious to the firestorm raging in her wake. She had spent the flight refining her keynote, practicing the complex demonstrations of her Synapse software, and mentally preparing for the question and answer session with some of the most brilliant minds in the technology sector. The incident at the gate now felt like a surreal and ugly prelude to the real reason for her journey. When the plane landed at SeaTac, she deplaned with the other passengers. But as she walked into the terminal, she immediately sensed something was different. People were glancing at her, not with the casual curiosity of fellow travelers, but with open recognition. A young man in a University of Washington hoodie pointed, whispering to his friend, "That's her. That's the girl from the Atlas Air video." Her phone, which she switched out of airplane mode, began to vibrate so violently it felt like it might shake apart. The screen lit up with an impossible torrent of notifications. News alerts with her name in the headline, thousands of new followers on all her social media profiles, and an email from Edward Vance, the CEO of Atlas Air himself, containing a multi-page, groveling apology and a personal offer of a lifetime of free first-class travel anywhere in the world. She was met at the jet bridge by a woman in a stylish suit holding a sign that simply read, "Dubois." "Amara Dubois?" the woman asked, her eyes wide with a new level of respect. "I'm Sarah from the Future Forward Conference. We have a car waiting for you. We saw what happened. We are all so incredibly sorry you had to experience that." "It's fine," Amara said, though the sheer magnitude of the public reaction was beginning to overwhelm her. The drive to her hotel in downtown Seattle was a blur of her scrolling through her phone. She watched the video Mr. Peterson had posted. It was somehow even more damning than she remembered. Seeing it from an outsider's perspective, Susan's sneering contempt, her own quiet dignity, was deeply unsettling. She read the comments, a tidal wave of support that was both affirming and dizzying. She was no longer just Amara Dubois, the tech prodigy. She was now a symbol. The next morning, as she prepared for her keynote speech, the story had already evolved. News organizations had dug deeper. They weren't just reporting on the viral incident. They were reporting on her. Headlines now read, "Teenage Genius Racially Profiled en route to accept Prestigious Innovation Award." They detailed her invention, Synapse, her academic accomplishments, and her groundbreaking speech at Future Forward. The story of Susan Pierce's prejudice had inadvertently become the single greatest marketing campaign for Amara's work that anyone could have devised. The main auditorium at the Seattle Convention Center was packed to the gills. Future Forward was always a sellout event, but today the room was overflowing. Attendees who had originally planned on seeing other panels had flocked to hers, eager to see the young woman at the center of the viral maelstrom. The press corps was 10 times larger than what had been scheduled. When she was introduced, the applause was thunderous. It wasn't just for her expected technological genius, it was an ovation of solidarity, a show of admiration for her grace under fire. Amara walked onto the stage, took a steadying breath, and looked out at the thousands of faces staring back at her. She could stick to her prepared script, focus only on the technical details of her algorithms. But she knew in her gut that the moment required more. "Good morning," she began, her voice unwavering. "My presentation today is about interface technology. It's about taking something incredibly large and complex, like the human brain, and making it accessible, more efficient, without losing the essential information." She paused, letting the words resonate in the vast hall. This week, I was given a powerful reminder that we often do the very same thing with people. We take a quick glance at an individual, at their age, their gender, their race, and we compress them. We shrink them down into a tiny, oversimplified file in our minds, a label, a stereotype. And when we do that, we lose the essential information. We lose the fidelity of their very soul. A profound hush fell over the audience. "Prejudice," she continued, her voice ringing with newfound passion, "is the ultimate lossy compression. It strips away the data of a person's character, their intellect, their capacity for kindness, their immense potential. It leaves you with nothing but a corrupted file, a distorted and useless image that serves only the biases of the person doing the compressing. My work with Synapse is about achieving perfect fidelity. I believe our work as human beings must be the same." She then launched into her presentation. She was beyond brilliant. She explained her complex work with an elegance and clarity that left the entire audience, from seasoned tech executives to young coders, spellbound. She was poised, witty, and in absolute command of her subject matter. When she concluded, the room exploded in a standing ovation that seemed to go on for several minutes. In the aftermath, the titans of technology did not just want to meet her. They wanted to back her. A bidding war erupted. Representatives from every major tech firm and a dozen elite venture capital firms cornered her. By the end of the day, she had not only accepted her award, but she had also closed a Series A funding round of $75 million for her new company, Synapse Dynamics, making her one of the youngest self-made tech CEOs in the world. She politely declined Atlas Air's offer of lifetime free flights. Instead, her newly hired legal team sent them a counteroffer. Donate the monetary equivalent of that offer, an estimated $2.5 million, to a new non-profit foundation dedicated to providing STEM education scholarships for students from underrepresented communities. Faced with a continuing public relations nightmare, Atlas Air agreed immediately, announcing the Dubois Grant in a public press release that lauded Amara's generosity of spirit. The story of Susan Pierce is more than just a viral video or a moment of airport drama. It's a powerful, real-world reminder that our actions, no matter how small they seem, have consequences that can ripple out in ways we can never predict. It's a story about grace in the face of prejudice, and the undeniable truth that character, not the color of your skin or the price of your ticket, is the true measure of a person. Susan's blind hatred inadvertently launched a brilliant mind and funded a new generation of innovators, proving that the best response to those who try to tear you down is to build something that will outlast them all. If this story moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And for more true stories of karma, justice, and the incredible power of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring that notification bell. What did you think of Susan's karma? Let us know in the comments below.